Hi everyone, how are you today? I went back and forth on whether I was going to review this book. This is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, and it is a work of it's a work of fiction, but it's also nonfiction, and I'll explain a little bit more how that can be in a minute. But it's a very serious book. It's something that I picked up for a book club that I'm part of, and I wasn't necessarily going to read this, although it had crossed my radar a few times in the past. It's a story of a young Arab girl who is abducted by Israeli soldiers in 1949. This is just after the Arab-Israeli War of 1948. So just some months after the end of that war, we've got this real-life incident of a young girl kidnapped by soldiers, humiliated, assaulted, and brutally murdered. And I usually stay away from books about violence against women and children, especially sexual violence. But I was looking into this a bit more and read that it's more sensitively written. Like, it's not graphic, it's just trying to give the facts. And I felt like this has been one of the best books I've read this year, and so I thought I really do need to talk about it and encourage people to check it out, even though the subject matter is really so dark. So the first half of the book, it's a short little book, really. I think it's like 112 or something, but the first half of the book is recounting that horrific crime, and it's from the perspective of one of the commanders, and it's told in a very mundane way, actually. One of the criticisms I've seen of this book is that Shibli really tells the story in very understated ways. She's focusing on, as the title indicates, minor details, not just the fact that this particular incident was considered a minor detail in the larger conflict, but all the things that happen in this commander's day, all the little details of his life leading up to and after, what they did to this girl. So again, one of the criticisms I've seen of this book is that it's kind of boring. Some people think it's told in too boring of a way. And in the second half of the book, the author is recounting her journey of learning about the story in a very auto-fictitious sense, meaning some of it I think is true and some of it's fictionalized, and towards the ending you can see why parts of it are fictionalized. But again, very matter of fact. There's not really a lot of narrative in like the sense you'd usually find in a novel. It's more of just a straightforward telling with a super focus on small details. For example, and this isn't really a spoiler, but the commander gets bitten by an insect, and that insect bite gets worse as the days go on, and we're reminded of this. We're reminded of his rituals for cleaning his wound and cleaning his face and keeping his tent clean. Like, it just really digs into these details. And even in the second half of the book, there are some recurring motifs that call back to the first part of the book: a dog's bark or the smell of petrol. And what Shibli's doing here is just getting us to slow down a bit and realize, and I think this is one of the most horrifying things of the book, to really understand that a lot of these sorts of war crimes, and I'd say many crimes in general, are part of this mundane routine of crimes. And so I think what she's trying to say here is that this is a, quote, minor detail, but the fact that it is really just another indication of a whole long line of these minor details, these crimes upon crimes upon crimes. And they're just, they follow one after the other, much in the way that this commander's morning routine, goes through. Like, he's just, this is his life. he has a life that involves a bunch of small and sometimes a lot of big crimes. And this is one of many. But the emphasis, again, I think, is it's a lifestyle. It's something that is not exceptional. Sadly, it's something very common. And so in the second half of the book, when she's talking about her research for this, there's this part where she's like, why am I doing this? Like, there's enough bad news, right? Like, this is something that happens a lot. And why am I so fixated on this one story? And granted, she's writing this. Well, this was published in 2017, I believe. The first English translation came out in 2020. This particular edition is 2025. But she's writing this in the 2010s, presumably, or sometime in the modern day, and yet she's so obsessed and absorbed with this thing that happened in the 1940s, and she read about it in an Israeli, I think it's a magazine or a newspaper, that talks about what happened, and she gets really shaken by it. And one of the reasons she gets shaken by it is another minor detail, the fact that it happened on the day of her birth. I think that this sort of the stickiness of small details like that, stuff that just haunts you, I think I can really relate to that personally. So that really drew me in, especially to the second half. But in the second half, she really focuses on the bureaucracy of the system she lives in, and also this sense of oppression that is not as overt as that in the first half of the book, where the violence is very visible and just shocking. There is violence in the second half of the book, but it's more of these undertones, these undercurrents. There is imprisonment in the second half of the book, but it feels like it's more under the surface. She's limited how she can travel. She's limited the things she can do and the places she can see. She's trying to research this book, and just the act of trying to find that information and go to the places where the crime happened so long ago. Her movements are so restricted, and her anxiety is part of that. Like, it's something that's been imposed on her, and she's also absorbed it. She talks about these walls, both physical and mental and emotional, and she just about has a nervous breakdown trying to learn about this case and learn about this girl. I found this part of the book to be really moving in a different way than the first book. The first part of the book is just horrifying. It is sensitively written, but it still leaves you feeling utterly sick. I think the way that she focuses more on the humiliation of the girl versus any graphic details of the actual crime, I think that humiliation is what really just leaves you totally shaken and disgusted and sickened. And then in the second half of the book, you see a transformation of spaces, maps rewritten, places unrecognizable, little scraps of buildings or plants here and there to show where the original villages were. She's going to places she hasn't seen in a long time, and by the time she gets there, it's all different. It's really different. So I found that part actually really moving in a different way than the first part. It just, if you've ever been somewhere after a long absence and seen things change, if it changes for the better, you can feel kind of good about that, maybe a little nostalgic for what it used to be like, but you're thinking, yeah, this place has at least gotten some attention, maybe nicer sidewalks or streets, whatever, nicer parks. But if you go back to a place and it's been transformed by war, and you see skyscrapers and new roads and freeways and things, but you still, there's still that undercurrent of violence that brought about those changes. It really left me, I was moved to tears, to be honest. I think just that matter-of-fact way she explores this. And I would even say, and I don't want to overuse this term because very easy to overuse this term, but there is an element of the Kafkaesque in the second part of the book. Just the feeling of trying to accomplish something and being thwarted at every turn and feeling like you're searching for truth. You're searching for information, just information. And it's being held from you. It's been rewritten. It's gone. Nobody wants to help you. Nobody can help you. And the little steps of trust she has to take just to do that, just to research this story, I found that very disturbing and troubling too. And sometimes her acts of faith and trust are rewarded, and sometimes they don't work out. And that is just very, very unsettling. So, yeah, and I'm not going to spoil the ending because I thought the ending was fantastic. It was a really, really good ending. And the book is as long as it needs to be. I won't say anything more because I just really would encourage people to check this out. I know that the subject matter may be controversial or contentious, but personally, I think this is an important story to tell. And I will go a step further and say that the way Shibli writes about these things, not only does it open your eyes to a particular plight at a particular time in history, which is also ongoing, but she also makes you think about this on a more universal level. And the banality of evil is never been more clear as it is in this book. And I think that the book actually holds a lot of universal ideas and themes as well as being very specific to this time and place. So, yeah, that's my review of Minor Detail. Again, would recommend it if you are on the fence or maybe you've never heard of it. I think the writing itself was very beautiful, very sensitive, and very emotional in a very understated way. And so I want to read more by her, and there's one or two books that I see have been translated as well. So I will look out for those. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.